How do you want to be treated? That's a pretty big question. And I think we all think about that in the moment when something happens and we're not really comfortable. We're thinking, you can't treat me like that. You shouldn't treat me like that. So the theme of this conference, I think, is really important because it asks us to exercise the moral imagination and to think about ourselves in a very concrete way as the recipient of certain kinds of behaviors by others and whether or not we think those behaviors are appropriate. Now, the other reason I think this topic is so important is that it maps onto work that I'm doing currently, where the question is very similar in its orientation, but just slightly different. So, the question I'm now working on constantly is what kind of world do you want to live in? And in that context, I'm asking people, again, to exercise the moral imagination and to think about a future world in which they might be on the receiving end of caring that they're now being asked to offer. Now, the caring that we're offering now may be in an informal context in terms of caring for older family members, or it may be in a formal context having to do with one's employment. For example, you might be involved in nursing, in occupational therapy, in physiotherapy. You may be a government employee that's actually having to execute certain kinds of directives, or you may be a policymaker. But the bottom line is that many of us today are working in a context where we're trying to make care available to others. And we should also at all times be thinking of the fact that one day we might be on the receiving end of that care. So, what kind of care are we building? What kind of world are we building? A world, hopefully, in which aging matters and matters for the right reasons because we want to do well by others. In my previous work in this space, I've done a lot of thinking about the concept of identity, and I've defended the view that all of us ultimately are but the sum of our stories. And so, one of the things I think that then becomes really important to think about in this context is what stories are you contributing to that will, in part, belong to some other person with whom you've interacted, but that also become a part of your life narrative, and so they're your story as well. And then as you continue to age, you will have stories about how you've treated others, and you will have stories about how others are treating you. And I think that what you want to have in common between those stories is this sense of commitment to things like belonging and recognition. Let me end by sharing with you a very small anecdote, but it's a moment in which this notion of kindness really registered for me. I was out with my mother in a restaurant. It was a new restaurant to both of us, but she insisted that she had been there many times before. And in fact, she insisted that she knew the man who had been serving us. And she spoke to him as if they were old friends. He was a little perplexed. But in short order, he cottoned on and he played along. And what he did in that moment, I registered as an important act of kindness. It allowed my mother to feel respected. It allowed her to feel like she was a part of a community. It allowed her to have those sense of recognition and belonging. And so I guess one of the things I'm asking all of us to think about is what role can we play on a daily basis that shows kindness and respect for others? Because those are the things that build the world in which we live. Thank you.